College football nerds here talking Alabama and Texas A&M. This game has been circled by both of these teams for a while now, maybe since the last one where the Aggies pulled off the victory. Josh is with me. We're getting nerdy with y'all. We're going to talk about it with the model, and we're going to get into some discussion about backup quarterbacks, Josh. Before we get going, I want to remind y'all we do a live show every Saturday night, and if you haven't already, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, do all that. But while you're down there, give us your score prediction for this game, but give us two. One, if the starting quarterbacks play. Two, if both the backup quarterbacks play. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. Everybody saw that Bryce Young got hurt against Arkansas, and Jalen Milroe came in, ran wild, didn't throw it great, didn't have to throw it too much. It was a little bit of a herky-jerky offense when he was trying to throw the ball. But Jahmyr Gibbs went crazy, went absolute ham. No pun intended, but it landed anyway. And Josh, we saw Haynes King come in for Texas A&M and really didn't do great at all. Not a great position to be in when he came in, but it was a lot of more of the same that we've seen all year. I think that, Josh, let's start with this. This is a theory I have, and I don't think it's that wild of a guess. Because Bryce Young wasn't severely injured, even if he was too injured to be able to play this Saturday, I think that they kept him on the sidelines looking happy, looking fresh, for the very reason to give Texas A&M the need and the visuals that they're going to have to prepare for Bryce Young one way or the other, even if there's no way he's going to play this Saturday. What do you think about that?
I think there's probably at least something to it. Now, I think that they probably had Bryce Young in pads with his helmet on because he was able to go in if he needed to. I can't think that guy's carrying around his helmet if he wasn't not only well enough to be able to go in the game, but there was some thought if everything went wrong, they were going to put him in. So I think it's a little more than that. But I definitely think it's interesting that you've got two teams with an unsettled quarterback situation. Max Johnson, injures his thumb. And it's questionable as of right now. We record on Sundays whether or not he's going to be able to play. And it's his thumb on his throwing hand. So I'd kind of lean towards he's probably not going to be able to play. And especially knowing Haynes King's had all the problems he's had, but it was a tight race to begin with. They're probably not going to want to play Max Johnson. They can't really throw the football. And then on the other side, of course, Bryce Young sprained his AC joint is what Saban said. So a bit of an open question. Yeah, I think it's tough. Now, there's another side to it too, right? It's not just about whether you prepare for Bryce or not, whether he's on the sidelines. I almost think the more interesting conversation in that regard is who gets a bigger advantage from having two quarterbacks. And that's where I think Alabama is actually in a pretty envious position here, because I don't think Texas A&M really does terribly different things with Max Johnson and Haynes King. Yes, Haynes King may be better at running certain plays than Johnson is, but I think the offense is essentially the same. Alabama's going to run very different plays if they run Jalen Milroe and Bryce Young. So with me, it's not just the fact that Bryce Young's sitting out there looking pretty and fresh. It's that Texas A&M is going to legitimately have to prepare for two offenses. And I don't think Alabama really does. And that's a pretty significant edge, I think.
College Football Nerds has a new sponsor. Josh, I wear shorts all day, every day. I wake up in them, I work in them, I go to sleep in them, and I need something comfortable. But even though I'm a dad, my wife won't let me do the dad kit thing. No cargo shorts, no baggy stuff. I got to have something that's flattering. And I'm 6'4", 240, and I could even stand to lose a couple of pounds, but Bird Dogs fit the bill for that. They're super flattering. They're super comfortable. Got a built-in liner, and I can wear them whenever I want to. Wife loves them. They pass the wife test. But, Josh, you live in a cold climate sometimes in D.C., and you can't always just wear shorts, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I'm also a nerd, which means I have no idea how to pick out my own clothing. So when Bird Dog sent us a sample of these, and I'm currently wearing the joggers, what I discovered is that they sell a line of joggers. They sell pants that are semi-professional business pants that look nice. They fit nice. I'm 6 foot, a little too close to 240 for my height, but good enough that these things fit. They fit well. They have lined and unlined stuff. And I got to say, it's comfortable. It's fashionable. It's as good as that other brand with the Greek logo, but it's $20 less. So I've actually liked them enough that I've talked to my wife about buying more, and that has nothing to do with the fact that they're giving us a promo. It's just a good product and something that I genuinely would endorse.
So go to birddogs.com, enter promo code CFB Nerds, and they will throw in a free Bird Dogs rope hat. That's birddogs.com, 2Ds. Promo code CFB Nerds, and boom, free Bird Dogs rope hat with your pair of Bird Dogs. The most comfortable shorts, pants, sweatpants with built-in liners. You will not want to take these things off. And guys, we don't do a lot of Patreon or ask for too much. But when somebody supports the channel, we want to make sure that y'all do your thing and go out and support them. So go to birddogs.com, 2Ds, buy some good stuff, make your wife or girlfriend happy. Yeah, and I think there's another layer to this too, in that they're going to have to prepare for Jalen Milroe, but I don't think we've seen the Jalen Milroe package yet, which could be a huge advantage if there is one, and I think there is. What we saw Saturday was Milroe running Bryce Young's play set in that game. It was not a lot of zone read option, a lot of quarterback design runs. Now the touchdown run he did pull it at the mesh point and run in, and I think that was a little sprinkling of what they've got for him. So if that's the case and there is a Jalen Milroe package, that might be a pretty big deal. But I will say that Texas A&M's defense, I think, is set up to be a lot more successful against a guy like, say, Milroe or Anthony Richardson at Florida that maybe isn't quite there yet in terms of the passing game, but can win with his legs a lot against some teams. If there's a team out there defensively that could maybe really stop him or stop the running game, because that's what you need if your quarterback can't throw it really well or isn't ready to execute the passing game at a high level, you need to be able to run the ball. And if there's a team out there, I think, that's got the talent to do it, it probably is A&M.
The problem is they got the talent, but I'm not sure that talent's really translating, right? Mississippi State is not a team that likes to run the ball, and they ran the ball for 144 yards in that game. They didn't get a sack in the game against Will Rogers, which is kind of a rare thing given how much Mississippi State likes to throw the ball. Now, it was a short game. This has kind of been a hallmark of games under Jimbo Fisher because of his style of offense and how they snap the ball and when they snap the ball. Their games have been short. So there were only 70 plays in the game for A&M. There were only 69 for Mississippi State. A lot of teams are playing more in like the 80 range these days. Looking at Alabama, their game was particularly short, it was in the 60s. But Arkansas, for example, ran 85 plays. It's interesting because I think Texas A&M in theory should be able to give Jalen Milroe and the offense issues if they've got the ball. But the reality right now, and I'll go ahead and spoil something in our model, Texas A&M is giving up 111% of opponent rushing averages. 111%. They give up more than your average. So for whatever reason, that talent isn't translating. And Arkansas did have good pass rushers. Drew Sanders was leading the country in sacks going into that game. There were ways for them to make Alabama uncomfortable and disrupt. They had good players on the edges. I'm not sure A&M can really match that. And so I think you end up with a different result. And I think, well, I say different result in that I don't know that they're going to be effective in the same way. That actually leads me to one of the more strange statistics from the last game, and maybe we could have a slight diversion. Something you brought up, right? QBR. Why in the world do the backup quarterbacks from both the Alabama and the A&M game have a higher QBR? Jalen Milroe had a QBR, that's ESPN's metric, of 98.5. Bryce Young had 81.4. And in the A&M game, Haynes King was 63.5 and Max Johnson was 63.3. Max Johnson was 62.5. I know the answer, which is in large part that ESPN counts run stats as part of QBR, but come on, man. Haynes King was 3.8 yards per attempt with 2 picks. Max Johnson threw a touchdown, no interception, 7.8 per. It's pretty nice. Bryce Young was 13.3 yards per attempt. And Jalen Milroe had a good day, but is 4-9 passing at 7.2 per. I mean, Daniel, I know you've got to have thoughts on this. Isn't it kind of crazy that the backup quarterbacks have a higher QBR? And how much does that sort of indicate, I think, the messed up way we evaluate a lot of quarterbacks in these games?
Yeah, and I think it's funny because ESPN, if you use their box score, it's just QBR, not QB rating, because it's their stat. But you're right, like, if we're penalizing guys with sack yardage as their rushing totals, that's another level of stupidity if we're using QBR with running numbers. But also, I think in general, there's got to be a better way, like, to understand the full picture of effectiveness of a quarterback. But it all starts with their ability to throw the ball. So if nothing else, there needs to be a heavier weight towards the passing game in QBR calculations. And because it's not like we're playing a bunch of triple option, football out there. That's the exception, not the rule. So it can't be an equal weight. And I think that's what we've got here. In some ways, maybe a heavier weight if you look at the Texas A&M QBR because of, Max Johnson's numbers weren't terrible. Haynes King's numbers were atrocious throwing the ball. But that gets me into something here, Josh. Milroe or Bryce Young, I might give two scores for this if either of those two play, but I think my score for Texas A&M is about the same. But in general, what I've seen from this Alabama defense is what nobody's talking about. The Alabama defense, and I know they gave up 26 points or whatever Saturday. A lot of that was special teams and the offense going into a shell. I honestly think at this point in the season, A&M has showed us who they are offensively. And even against, so Arkansas, Mississippi State, there's non-offensive touchdowns. A&M is a 13 to 17 point offense. That's who they are. They are kind of Iowa. They are a 13 to 17 point offense, and there's going to have something crazy have to happen for me to think otherwise. And against this Alabama defense, even if Milroe's struggling offensively, Alabama's struggling offensively with Milroe, I don't see them putting up more than 13 to 17 points.
Yeah, I tend to agree with it. And do you mind if right now we just go ahead and transition into the model a little bit? Okay, so the thing that I want to start off with is percentage of opponent averages allowed, right? So the stat of if they're averaging 9 yards per pass and you allow 6, you're allowing 2/3 of their average, or 66%. Comparing Alabama's numbers to historical norms is pretty darn impressive. Last year, at the same time, I happened to have run a model for Georgia in week 5, and I just pulled it up a second ago, so I'm kind of riffing here live. Georgia was allowing 71% of opponent rushing averages and 72% of opponent passing averages. At this point, Alabama is currently allowing 55% of opponent rushing averages and 73% of opponent passing averages, meaning statistically compared to who they're playing and the quality of teams they're playing, Alabama is as good against the pass as Georgia and quite a bit better against the run. And I also, just for the sake of argument, went ahead and pulled up the national championship game model. So these were the final season numbers. The final season for Georgia was 58% against the run, 77% against the pass. Alabama right now, compared to what opponents do coming in, Alabama is a better defense than Georgia was to end 2021 today. That's kind of terrifying. Alabama is a better defense right now by a pretty considerable margin compared to how they ended last year. So I'm with you. The Alabama defense is excellent. It is very much underrated. There's priors and other things going on that I think are kind of hiding. We've talked a lot about the past week and a half about how priors, meaning last year's data from the results from last year and recruiting data, is really helpful to make an accurate model from a prediction standpoint. But our model isn't really built on predictions. Our model is about saying, based only on what you've done this year, what does your B-plus game look like? And what will it look like here? And we do it for trend purposes. It's a data point that we use to build off of, us in our heads knowing everything that happened last year. And in that regard, I think because of priors, people are still kind of have an evaluation of Alabama based off last year. And it's really good, but a lot of teams have really good stats. Georgia's has it, and it sort of sits there. The reality of what they've done on the field is that Alabama's playing in a good tier better than they were last year. That's the story. And Texas, maybe this is a good point, right? Texas A&M last year against Alabama did what they did because of the offense, because of Alabama's defense giving up a lot of points in that game, and that's what created the pressure. Our model doesn't see that. So right now the projection is A&M already said 111% of opponent rushing averages, 86% of opponent passing averages. It's an okay to pretty good pass defense. It is a bad run defense, playing an absolutely uber elite run defense and an elite pass defense. And it shows up immediately in the yard per play numbers and the score. Alabama at 7.6 yards per play is cruising. Anything over 7 means you're generally moving the ball at a high degree of efficiency. Alabama is expected to throw the ball reasonably well, about 7.5 yards per attempt. Their yard per attempt numbers, I should be clear, have been actually kind of pedestrian. They've been floating around 7 yards, even below that against not great teams. Their run game, which went into the last week, and we flagged in the Arkansas game, and I made a big deal out of it, and it was almost prophetic. Alabama was leading the country in yard per carry by a half yard. And I said, look, if Alabama plays where all they did was run the ball every snap, I thought they were going to be able to beat Arkansas. It turned out to be kind of jinxing Alabama into forcing me right, but they were right. Alabama was able to run the ball down their throat and put that game away. We're seeing that again. Alabama against this run defense has a significant edge, and Texas A&M on the sort of the opposite side of it. Their run game is expected to be really anemic at 2.5 yards a carry. The passing game at 4.5 yards per attempt is really, really lousy. And so you end up with a score of 41-10, where it's basically, honestly, just giving Texas A&M pity points to say, yeah, you find a way to score 10, because teams generally put a drive or two together. And then Alabama gets to 41 and probably just stops. Like, the model has very, very little respect for this matchup. Not shocking given the Mississippi State Texas A&M result. But it is, and to me, it's always a little encouraging, or it's always interesting to see the model track with trends.
Yeah, and the model's also got this, implicit transitive data with Texas A&M and Arkansas. And even though A&M won that game, the actual yards and points per play were not in its favor. We try to do these pretty quick. We haven't even gotten into things like Jaheim Otis stepping up for Alabama with some guys out on that defensive line, how well their corner play is this year. They've got elite corner play. Even though Arnold's a redshirt freshman, they've got elite corner play. And if Branch comes back, I can't imagine a quarterback either in Max Johnson or Haynes King that have struggled to throw the ball against bad defenses or mediocre defenses are going to do much against Alabama. I do think they've got, explosive player in A-Chain, and they can make things happen from a defensive short in the field standpoint, either a turnover or some sort of quick change situation. But I'm not super high on A&M winning this game, even with Milroe. So I've got Alabama 27, Texas A&M 17 if Milroe plays. And if Bryce Young plays, I've got Alabama 42, Texas A&M 13. What do you got?
I think it's going to be worse. And you did the Bryce Young versus Milroe thing, but I'll be honest, I don't think it's going to really matter that much. I think the bigger issue may be whether or not Max Johnson can play. If Max Johnson can play, I'm going to say this game ends 37-13 Alabama. I think that their edges are going to take over regardless, just because of their ability to run the ball. But I think if Haynes King plays, because Texas A&M, I think with Haynes King, is not going to have any real ability to threaten Alabama. They can't reliably throw downfield, and they're going to be able to be very aggressive with King, even though they're going to want to keep him boxed in the pocket. King does not read blitzes well. He predetermines things. He's going to turn the ball over. He turned it over twice last week. I think if he plays, this game's going to get really out of hand. I would actually pick this game 51-7, just throwing a number out there. So you can call that 34-13 my prediction. But if Haynes King plays, and especially if Bryce Young plays, or they have a real passing game, I think Texas A&M is going to run into an absolute buzzsaw in this one.
Vegas has got Alabama favored by 24. I know some of that is probably a hedge with Milroe, because they don't know either way, which is interesting. I don't know how they do this in this situation. I asked a friend of mine who probably knows a little something on the inside, said that he's got a pretty good feeling that Bryce Young's going to play. And if that's the case, I don't know that it matters. Like you said, on the other side, who plays quarterback, they're not winning the game. Josh, I want to close out with this last thing. Let's say Bryce Young does play. Given the heated kind of discussion that came out of earlier this year between Saban and Fisher, do you think Saban would use this game to kind of make a point and put up a number, or do you think that's not going to come into play at all?
It's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever seen Saban intentionally run up the score or really step on the gas. but once or twice. And I'll say one time I think they did it several years ago when they played Kevin Sumlin with Blake Sims. They did that, and they put up 50-something points in that game, and they just kept coming. I actually think they might. I think this is one of the rare cases where Alabama might actually try to run up the score and put a number up on somebody. And I want to really sort of end on this part of the conversation for anybody that stuck around and follows our commentary too. What are your thoughts on Jimbo Fisher, on not just the rivalry with Nick Saban, but in particular where he's at with Texas A&M, where they have the program headed? I know we both believe Texas A&M absolutely used NIL to get players. You can talk. Neither one of us have ever alleged that that's cheating or they did anything unethical, but they absolutely used their NIL pool to get players in. I wholeheartedly believe that. But I think there's maybe been some effects of that, and I think there's maybe been sort of some bad signs about Jimbo Fisher's style and coaching, and I know you have opinions, so I'll turn it back to you to let you comment on it. But I think that's maybe an important thing to end on, given where these teams are at. And we were for sure going to do this matchup because of how big it was coming into the year, but it's lost a lot of luster, and I think that this point of conversation is probably why.
Yeah, I mean, we're mad at Jimbo just because he's hurt our obvious numbers that we're going to do on this video. But no, I think that's great homework for people that have made it this far. Let us know in the comments what you think about Jimbo Fisher. The one thing that I'll say, Josh, as I sign off is I don't know what they can do, because they made this huge misstep of giving him a ton of money without any hardware. Still hasn't won the division, and they've given him just this gigantic multi-million-dollar contract. I think he's got a couple more years on it before the buyout even falls below $50 million. So that's insane to me that they did that to begin with. But I think for all that we're talking, what Texas A&M fans need to hope and pray is that he lets his ego be removed from the situation and go out and get a real offensive coordinator and let them have the keys. If he can do that, the whole situation can be turned around. If not, I think they're kind of in trouble, because the NIL thing is one thing, but this is going to flip recruiting in the wrong direction pretty fast if he goes 6-6 this year. I think that's kind of what they're staring at. So maybe, to end on a positive note, maybe he goes out and gets a real coordinator, and then he's set up because he's got the talent to do it. Y'all let us know in the comments what you think about that, and give us your score prediction. Thanks so much for hanging with us this long. Y'all have a great week, and God bless.